Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another YouTube video. Today, we'll be talking about a very juicy topic: working for free versus working for only payment. That's basically exposure versus getting paid every time. You've probably heard this line that working for exposure is very terrible. You shouldn't work for exposure. You should only work for money because you are being exploited, you are being used. And today I would like to do a little dive into whether it's worth it to work for exposure or whether money should be the only fair form of compensation. So many industries, especially the creative industry, always say that working for exposure will lead to more opportunities, and some on the flip side also say that it's just a form of exploitation and it never worth it at the end. But to me, I would say working for exposure makes sense to a certain extent or to some certain levels. And me too, we also say that working for money is only fair at certain levels. For example, when you are just starting out, working for exposure is not so bad. On the flip side though, free work is not always valuable. When you're just starting out, I feel you shouldn't be so worried about money, especially if it's something that you're doing for passion. You shouldn't just be bothered about how much you can get. Sometimes you should just be worried about building skill, raising your skill level to a certain extent so that you can charge, because at the end of the day you must put in reps to get to a certain level of industry standard and industry competence. And the major way to get that most times will be working for free, doing internships, working some exposure type work, because at that stage in your career, very few people would employ your service because you are not even so good yet. So yeah, at that stage, working for exposure actually makes sense. But then you must be careful to not overdo it to a certain extent, because there's also a situation where you work for people for exposure for a long time, and at the end of the day, when they want to do like proper gigs, they will take your job to another person who they will actually pay. And at the end of the day, was your working for exposure now worth it? The thing is, yes, it was actually worth it because you built skill, you raised your experience levels to certain points where you have reached industry competence levels and all that. So you actually won in a way, though you are losing money also. So yeah, working for free sometimes makes sense, but you have to be very careful. You have to even be self-aware to the point that I'm at a point now that I can start charging because I'm getting very good at this, and you know when to leverage on getting money and all that. So before we even go far, let's actually talk about what working for exposure actually means. Working for exposure is just basically doing work without expecting financial remuneration in hopes that you get future jobs, which is basically like maybe working for somebody and maybe they tag you, then apparently more work comes from there, or doing like internships. I can't even call internships per se working for exposure. I feel it's just doing work in hope for new opportunities. While working for payments, obviously that goes without saying, working for financial remuneration and bread. Working for exposure is actually valuable in some certain sense because it helps you build your portfolio, which is very important to get more jobs. Also, it might help you on a certain level, and when it's actually worth it and when both parties involved are true to their words, it can bring you more work because you can work for someone with a bigger following than you and they can tag you, and then that brings you more jobs, more opportunities in the future, which I don't necessarily advise. But it's super risky to work for exposure, I can't lie, because I feel that when you are used to working for exposure, you will not know when to stop. It's just like quicksand. You can just get drawn in a lot and you just fall off and you don't know when to stop, and you just continue working for exposure till all you did was work for exposure. Bread didn't really touch your hand and stuff. So as I earlier said, it is important to get paid for your work because at the end of the day, time, equipment, and skills have serious value. Your time is money, especially in the creative industry. Time is money a lot because time you are supposed to either use for growth or to gain some certain level of financial freedom. You will get caught up in working for free and it will just mess you up at the end of the day. Another thing is, it's very easy to get exploited when you work for free. It will also make people even undervalue your work because, as I said earlier, free is not always valuable, And also, working for money would buy you time that you can use to either pursue other interests or just even chase your happiness, as opposed to always working for exposure. And most times when you're working for exposure, you end up spending a lot of yourself, not just even only your money. You would even get like emotionally attached because you would feel that this work is your baby, and at the end of the day, people will just use you to some certain extent. Working for exposure also makes sense in some certain extent. As I said earlier, early in your career, when you actually don't have work to show, when you have to build your portfolio to show like potential clients that, okay, this is what you can do. Also, working for exposure is good because it helps you build your confidence, in the sense that you feel that because I've executed this certain project, when actual paid projects come, I would have the confidence to execute it. Also, working for exposure makes sense later in your career, especially when you have to do some sort of free work strategically in a way that you attract new work. For example, you're testing out a new type of product and then you work for exposure to showcase that certain product so that other people can purchase, or other like clients, or you're trying to target a certain client and you do some sort of free work for them so that they can see that, oh, you're able to do what you have promised, and they can give you like proper wedding jobs, which is still risky, as I've said earlier, because they can mess you over and give the proper paid jobs to people who are actually working for money. Also, I feel people feel that working for exposure is not worth it because they feel that if you can work for exposure, you don't truly value your work, which is crazy because it's supposed to be like a collaboration type stuff. Working for exposure also makes sense when you are doing like passion projects or non-profit projects, because you can't put a price to stuff like that. Since you're doing it for your happiness, or you're just doing work that just directly impacts your happiness or appeals to your sense of empathy, that makes sense at that point. So striking a balance, right? I feel that early in your career, you should work for free, especially when you're trying to build your portfolio, build work that you can actually show. Working for free makes sense at that point. But then after you have gained certain level of experience, you should just try to push to work for fair compensation. Also, you have to be very strategic in working for exposure because you have to ensure that the jobs you're actually doing lead to future jobs. So you have to get updated on the commercial standard, the industry level of competence, so that when you actualize this project, it just leads to getting paid. You have to be strategic about it, I must say, because at the end of the day, it's very easy to get used when working for exposure. And also, you have to put this in mind. Will I do this if money wasn't involved? If you can answer that question truthfully and it's a yes to you, then working for free makes sense. But if you answer that question and no, and like, I won't be doing this if money wasn't like a problem for me, then at that point, it doesn't make sense again, because you just get overstretched, and at that point, it's just negatively impacting you instead of positively impacting you. The place of working for exposure is very important. It helps you. Just make sure that it's fair and morally it's right to you. Make sure that it's something that is beneficial to you also in the long term, because you can just get caught up in working for free and all your life you just be working for free and you won't get fair compensation for stuff. Also, it makes sense in the sense that you can also appeal for maybe fair exchange in services. For example, instead of working directly for money, you can say, I'll shoot this free video for you as a restaurant, but you must give me shawarma. If that's what you're bothered about, but I'm just saying, just try and make sure that it's fair on certain levels. Also, you can seek for royalties, in the sense that if you are doing a creative project, you can say, okay, if the project I'm doing for exposure brings this certain amount of money, I should be cut a certain percentage. That makes a lot of sense. So that way you're not losing totally. If it works, money comes to you, you have gained the experience. If it doesn't work, you still gain the experience. No negative experience, you know what to do right next time, stuff like that. So then, how do you transition from doing free work to doing paid jobs? Number one, know when to charge. As I said earlier, once you get to a certain level of building your portfolio, stop doing free work. Instead, charge competitive rates. Instead of working for free, charge lower rates than the industry standard. At least you're getting bread, you're getting some level of compensation to buy gear, improve your quality, focus on doing paid jobs. Charge competitive rates. Can charge slightly lower than people who have been there longer than you. Also, another important thing is knowing when to say no. As I always say it personally, I'd rather stay at home than do what's not worth it to me. I'd rather just stay at home, enjoy myself, enjoy my time, than go and do jobs that are not worth it to me. It's too easy to get caught up in doing free stuff. And also know that people value what they pay for. At the end of the day, you value what you pay for than what you were given. It's just the truth. It's plain truth. Value is mostly attached to money, though it's not the right thing, but it's what it is. Your perception will always be increased when you charge. That's just the truth. The people who are paid the most money most likely get most respect because it's harder for people to even afford their services. So know that money equates to some certain level of respect in your industry. So don't go about doing free work because at the end of the day, it still negatively impacts you. You will not be, you sabi that guy where they use for free work as opposed to, bro, I would like to work with that guy, but money is tight. You get what I'm saying? So then, in conclusion, does exposure have value? Yes, in the right circumstances. When you are using it to strategically move forward, it does have value. But if that's what you just base your whole career on, definitely it doesn't. I'd rather be the guy that works for money than the guy that everybody knows that this guy offers great work, but he just uses it to get exposure. I'd rather be the guy that's not even good but is getting a lot of bread than be the guy who is super great but doesn't know how to leverage his skills for money. It's a very big plague that affects artists because at the end of the day, as artists, we do not know when to transition to making your art a business, which is a very important thing. So in the comment section, let me know, have you ever worked for free? Was it worth it for you? And also let younger people know how they can transition from working for free to working for money. So yeah, peace, love, and light. See you in the next video. Thank you so much. Bye.